Yo,
Yo, what's up, man? How are you doing?
chilling, chilling, chilling. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man.
Good, good. Well, I mean, ask away for the most part. I will say though, before we jump into it, I know you're doing it with the content in mind, which is that's what you guys are gonna do. We both have to be on the same page here.
Yeah.
We're totally speaking to come to some form of understanding.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm just
All right.
I'm just trying to figure out. I said it once in the review, right? What are you talking about? Because there's to me, it's not necessarily that we're trying to break down what you're trying to critique. We're just trying to find out what the fuck you're even trying to say in the first place.
All right, so there's two things, right, that we can point out here. Number one, couple key takeaways without going into too much detail. I was very clear that I was not going into a lot of detail on these. Number two, going beyond that point, just like I told you in the chat and I told Red, you guys are always welcome to just ask me to clarify. Because I said the same thing in Red's chat yesterday. There was somebody that tried to get me to elaborate on a couple points, and I was gonna elaborate. By the time I woke up, the tweet had already hit Eastern side of the audience. And there was no way I could keep up with any of the responses. Like I woke up and my phone was ding, 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 so I just muted it. So it has nothing to do with I purposely ignored anybody or, I wasn't gonna do anything. It's there's no way I can respond to, 52 different quote tweets trying to explain to everybody what's going on, right? So beyond that, some of this stuff I assumed was pretty straightforward, which I still think it is. I understand that I could elaborate more, which is totally fine. But there's a difference between me needing to spell out a lot of things for people and then me needing to elaborate on a point, right? Like if we can understand the base level of the point, then we can go beyond that. So some of these things I feel like might be explainable, but if not, you can ask away and then I'll answer it.
Okay, so I think to sort of play that back and re-clarify it for everybody in the situation, I think what you're trying to say is you made this tweet, you were explicit about not having much detail, and by the time that you sort of you made it before kind of going to bed, right?
Right.
And by the time you woke up, man, this shit went viral. It went crazy.
Yes.
And that sort of leads to, a lot more eyes, a lot more criticality, a lot more just negative public perception because it blew up so quickly and you didn't have the opportunity, right? Because you were obviously sleeping, but you weren't able to address a lot of those concerns on the fly.
Yes.
And so it looks like to a lot of people, right, that you're kind of either ignoring the responses, you're not addressing them, you're intentionally being vague, even though that's clearly not what you're trying to do, and that just further sort of amplifies the whole negative perception.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I'm glad that we're able to get down to the roots of that. To me, some people might not think that's a good excuse, but I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's perfectly fine, if I'm frankly being honest, because hey, stuff happens. It can be unfortunate when it does, but we also have to factor in that, hey man, your stuff has gotten viral before, true?
Yeah, but you know what's funny? I made 3 or 4 positive tweets. I don't think this one's negative inherently, but really positive tweets. Oh, I'm excited to, get back into the game, yada, yada, this and that, whatever.
And those didn't go viral.
No, not at all, dude. That's why I'm to me, right? Because I'm okay, I have a Wuthering audience. Because even on my Zenless videos or my Star Rail, I'll get random comments and they're oh man, when are you coming back to playing Wuthering Waves? This new character came out. Are you going to try this character? And I'm yeah, I could try them. Or I already pulled them. I don't know what I'm doing with the character, but I have them, So I'm okay, cool. I have this little bit of an audience. I could totally do whatever it is to, speak with them on that matter. Because not everybody's in my Discord and there's no way I can talk to everybody on YouTube. So I'm all right, it's fine. This went so far beyond, it was another one of those.
Yeah, another one of those, right? And you're very familiar to what one of those are from that previous interaction that you, or I guess the previous whole Wuthering Waves situation that you were involved in, correct? So glad that we were able to clarify that. Obviously, it's it's an unfortunate thing when it does happen, but stuff going viral is a risk, or it's a potential reward that we always have to factor in all of the time when we're a public figure like yourself or I.
Yeah, I can agree on that.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess my sort of viewpoint on it is I understand where you're coming from, but when everything has the potential to go viral, when everything has the potential to go crazy, presenting our arguments or presenting our points in the best way possible on the first pass is going to be the best way to get, a positive public perception at the end of the day. I think that's something that you were kind of not able to do here, unfortunately. And especially when it comes to something like a critique for the game, especially when it comes to something that we're trying to say is wrong or needs fixing or is currently a problem, right? I use the example of getting feedback on an exam, getting feedback on a test. Just seeing that a question or you scored low on something but then not being told what you did wrong, that is just straight up frustrating. And I think that's kind of what the perception was for a lot of people that interacted with this. They just saw that like, hey, you're saying something is bad, you're saying something is wrong. You didn't have the ability to respond because you were sleeping, and it made you kind of look at somebody that was just trying to make critiques for the game without, you know, having like a basis or a leg to stand on.
Yeah. So if I could elaborate, because this will explain a lot more of the points as well. Most of the people that know me, and when I say know me, I mean like they have one-on-one conversations with me, hang out in Discord, chat, whatever, right?
Yeah.
The people that know me know I'm like a huge analytical freak. I love YouTube.
Yeah.
So YouTube, TikTok, you know, short form content, Twitch, whatever. I'm almost always studying analytics. Most of the stuff I talk about, regardless of if it's Wuthering, Zenless, anything like that, it comes from an analytical standpoint behind content first, and then it'll come from everything else. Now, having a background with game design as well as being a business manager, I do understand a lot more when it comes to how something is perceived from a company standpoint. And, you know, like if I were in the event of this is my company, I'm the developer, whatever, how would I perceive this? How do I go forward? What's the best step? If, you know, me and the team had a meeting, what are we going to be spitballing? Cool. So a lot of that fills in those gaps. I guess that's kind of really it regarding all of that. As far as the downfall, I think people assume, because I saw the whole, what is it? This is an Eastern problem. The game's totally fine in Western. They're whales,
I think you're flipping it up. It's a Western problem. The game's fine in the East.
That's what I meant. Yeah. Western problem, but East is totally fine. The downfall part has nothing to do with finances whatsoever. I don't care about that. It also has nothing to do, from my take, with the Eastern side of things, because I'm not on the East. I have no idea what they're doing over there besides watching, you know, Billy videos of my own whenever I want to watch that type of content. But I can't translate. I don't get any type of, you know, we don't have a Mr. Poke for Wuthering, so to speak, right? That's going to translate what they're doing and then bringing it over here. So whenever I make anything, it has nothing to do with that. So when I talk about the downfall of it from a public perception, it's more so going along the path of what we see in global, which is what we have right now. We have a lot of the community that is publicly not in a good light. Like in the community, sure, we probably understand like we're not bad. You know, it's not horrible, whatever the case may be. It's totally fine. But outside of the Wuthering community, that's not what everybody else sees. You know, you have people IRL, they know what Wuthering Waves is. They know what gacha games are. They might know one of the creators here or there. And then they're able to, hey, I like that game. When it comes to console, I might play it. I don't watch content, or I don't go online because X, Y, and Z, all that kind of stuff. It's just the public perception overall. You can see this through Reddit forums, which I just don't like Reddit. Reddit's bad overall, but you can see this everywhere, right? And I think someone just mentioned League. League is the same way. The difference is League has a ton of popularity behind it, especially with Arcane just being as successful as it is. So they've amassed a better image for themselves over time. But prior to that, League was constantly known, and I'm sure you can attest to this, League was known as a horrible name for itself if you didn't play League. Like the random schmuck on the street finding out that you play League of Legends, they don't care. You know, it has a stigma to it. And I'm not saying that Wuthering specifically has a stigma to it compared to any other gacha game, right? It's one of those things where, hey, I like pancakes. Okay, so you hate waffles. No, I'm not saying that. All gacha games to a degree have this stigma behind it. Genshin had this stigma for years. And the only reason it doesn't have it, quote unquote, now is because there's other games that revolve around it. So we don't have to always point at Genshin, like, Genshin bad, Genshin trash. You know, yeah, play Nikkei in public. You're going to get, you know, whatever it is. So public downfall overall is it's the public perception. That's why that's in parentheses. It's not about anything pertaining to the game failing or EOS, which I learned, I guess that's what people perceive that to be, is like I'm saying it's going to EOS, but that's nowhere near what I'm getting at there.
Okay, so when you're talking about WuWa's downfall with that of the community, it's basically saying that like you're more so focusing on the potential negative reputation that is associated simply with playing or consuming content about the game.
Right, because what ends up happening, and this is again analytical side point of things, content almost at this point runs the world. We see this with Kai Cenat, we see this with Ninja and Fortnite. There's a lot about content that is heavily influential. And if we ignore it for whatever reason, then it ends up putting us in a bad position, depending on, you know, who you are, developer-wise or anything like that.
All right.
So when you have something that comes from the public side of things, content-wise, whatever the case may be, you always have to keep that stuff into account. If it's not doing well online, it's not going to do well for a lot of us. And since most of us are content creators, what ends up happening is we end up moving away. We end up dipping away from it.
Okay, so I guess to sort of just like backtrack and get like kind of like reiterate all the points so that's easier to follow. I'd like to think I'm a pretty good note taker. So hopefully we can make that part really smooth. Kind of like backtracking all the way to the start of the discussion. You didn't intend on the tweet being viral. No op to defend yourself in bed when it blew up. That means that, hey, it looks like you're being vague on purpose as a result of that.
Yeah.
But You weren't. That's a pretty fine summary of like just like the initial meta sort of situation, right?
Right.
All right, so from there we get into WuWa's downfall, right? Point number 1, basically. This is more based off of how the overarching community feels about anyone playing WuWa.
Yeah, or consuming content.
Yeah,
for both.
Anyone playing / consuming WuWa, right?
Right.
And this is where like the downfall is, right? If people have negative viewpoint on someone doing this.
Correct.
Okay, so that to you, at least from your opinion, that's where the problem is. And you brought up an example of, let's just say, like League of Legends, and how like people made fun of you back in the day for playing League.
Not me specifically, you know, but yeah.
Okay, maybe not you specifically, but just League of Legends players in general. So
right.
Yeah, just so you all know, I have been on record saying multiple times that I was a Masters League of Legends player. So yeah, definitely feeling a little bit of a personal sting from that one. But I can't confirm.
Don't feel it.
I can't confirm, you know, that yeah, that was not a great way to get girls back in the day. But I think nowadays League is pretty popular.
Yeah, Master's a huge accomplishment. Like that's a pickup line right there.
Yeah, it wasn't back then though, buddy. And I can confirm that was not back then. You were a bit of a nerd. So definitely, I think gaming's gotten a lot more popular in recent years. There's a reason why you get, you know, like Faker and stuff like that. Like most of their viewers of like the SKT1 team are actually females. So League is now back in, ladies and gentlemen, if you're trying to make friends. So don't view Iyo's example right now in the same light as it was back in the day, but I do understand what you're talking about. So that's kind of like more of the clarification here when we're looking at like the WuWa downfall piece. Okay, what about criticism is not y'all's enemy?
I feel like that one's very straightforward. It might not be specifically to your audience, because you're very well spoken, so you're able to guide your audience in a way that they understand. And if they didn't understand it, by the time you're done with your conversation, they'll have a semblance of understanding. That's not the entirety of the community, and it's not just WuWa, right? That's the gacha community, period. So it's a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of what has to be spelled out bit by bit for a lot of folks when it doesn't need to be. And so when you have something that would be criticism, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody doesn't like the game. Even now, I spoke with, I believe it was Solus yesterday or the day before, and he was showing me, you know, comments and explaining that he gets threats, or my bad, not Solus, Ethan. He gets death threats for saying what he doesn't like about the game, even though he clearly loves the game, right? But you say one thing that's not about the game and there's a death threat. And I'm sure we've all gotten something to some degree where it's like,
I actually haven't gotten a single one yet.
All right, I don't think you get those.
I haven't gotten a single one yet. Honestly,
yeah, I don't think you get those.
Nobody's actually been that rude to me, surprisingly enough. Like I hear all of this talk about like people like being told to, you know, do stuff in Minecraft, but like me, I actually haven't gotten anything.
Yeah, you know, and that's great, right? It's a little different.
That's not an invitation, by the way, guys.
Yeah, don't do that. But yeah, it's a lot, right? For instance, just speaking from my own experience, but I know Smack and I have shared conversations about this, and for obvious reasons, you know, skin color, but we receive racist comments all the time. Like,
yeah.
I literally got one from that tweet. Someone's calling me, I don't know how this even makes sense, but they said I'm from Texas, so it doesn't matter what I say, right? Like, I should just be off the face of the planet. I have someone, his literal profile, which I know it's bait, but still, the literal profile has the N-word in it. Like, they spell it a certain way, but there's a response that was there for me about being black and, you know, why they don't need blacks in the community or whatever. And this is normal for me. I'm just explaining that there's a lot that happens in between that everyone doesn't experience. You know, you won't experience it, Ethan wouldn't experience it, so on and so forth. But this open is a completely different point, but I'm just elaborating on that. It's very open. It's acceptable to be this way within the space. You know what I mean?
I would just say, man, I fully understand where you're coming from, where there's a whole perspective, right, of like, you know, technically there might be some people that are viewing you as like a quote unquote outsider to the space. And, you know, that's why you're getting comments like that. But I'm gonna be honest, it's just, I feel like we don't see a lot of it in a lot of places, at least publicly. And so the viewpoint that I feel like a lot of people have, and I think you even brought this up the last time you were in some, you know, a little bit of a drama a couple of months ago, you kind of said a similar thing. And my viewpoint is that when the community as a whole kind of like cleans up after themselves, and like content creators, they like delete those from their thing, they like moderate it so that it doesn't get posted. YouTube even has, you know, like very strict moderation overall, where that stuff doesn't even be shown on like people's public channels because it just gets auto filtered. It's like you're talking about a problem, you know, like these things that you're receiving in private, and it's awful that you're receiving them in private, right? It's not visible to a lot of members of the community, and like it's not something that's pushed by any other creator. And I think the perspective is that that's just like the low-hanging fruit from the perspective of that's just something that they're going to say because it's something that they can say, right? Like obviously, like I can be made fun of for being Asian, right? Or being like a League of Legends player, right? A lot of people say it's like, oh, he's just toxic because he used to play League. I've actually had a lot of people saying, and I think Fob actually said it too, right? A fellow Korean, on the call yesterday with Tectone. He kind of just said that like, hey, if you're like a Korean person that's good at games, you're like almost automatically elitist, right? So it's not something that like necessarily, obviously it's not to like the same degree that you have, but it's something that everybody has like some sort of like stereotype kind of put on them to a degree. And for me, it's like obviously not to like the full extent of like, you know, the negative things that you're getting from that side, but it is something that just occurs regardless. People will always try to find something like the lowest hanging fruit that they can have because, you know, people are kind of dumb. People are kind of stupid sometimes, right? And so the insults that they'll go to will be the ones that oftentimes are the easiest to think about or the easiest to give. And a lot of it just gets filtered out nowadays automatically. And so it's like, you know, it's kind of just like, obviously, like Asians in the space, in the gaming space, in the gacha space, right? They kind of just are more of like the natural, we're playing a game made by Chinese people. Or we're talking about a game made by Chinese people, right? So it's like, obviously, I don't think there's going to be like as much of like a negative spin on it just based off of that. But hey, you ever seen Asians in the basketball space?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, they get made fun of a lot there.
Yeah,
right?
until they put that ball in the goal.
Any Asian basketball player gets a lot of shit talk. So it's just like, you know, a different medium. It's a different thing. And, you know, just based off of like what the initial community is and whether or not you're viewed as like an outsider coming into it, right? I think it happens on all sides. So I wouldn't read too much into that. Like, I don't, like, I'm not saying that, like, it's not happening or it's not a big deal. But, like, I just think, like, using that as perhaps, like, potentially, like, a shield or something to, like, deflect. I don't think it's something that people are...
That wasn't my intention if it was. Yeah, if that's how it came off, that's not my intention. I was bringing that up simply during the part of the conversation with Ethan and I. And, like, expressing what him and I were talking about. So that's my bad if that came off that way.
Yeah, and it's just like, hey, when we think about like the critiques and the responses to it, Ethan is getting D threats, right? Ethan is getting D threats, but it's not because he's like white, or it's not because of like those things. It's because he's making critiques.
That's where I think we got off topic a little bit when I started explaining more in depth than I needed to. But if we go back to that, the death threat part, that's pretty common. That's not common. I think, like you said, you don't get those, but we could scroll through Twitter and there's something a little less civil about the responses that people get, or whenever you're having a criticism or something that should be criticized. Normally what happens between two adults or two average humans above the age of 16, I don't know, you're able to have a conversation and disagree or agree. You're able to converse with another human being about what you agree with, what you don't agree with, in a very civil manner. Twitter is not the place for that, which is why I try to have as few conversations as possible on Twitter, because they've shown me that that's not what they want to have, right? It's why I open the floor with all of you guys. If you want to have a convo with me, just call me up, right? DM me, whatever. And it's way easier to have these conversations where we can go back and forth without it being, here's what I think Iyo might be saying, or this is what I'm under the assumption he meant by this. You could just ask me, right? And so that, I don't want to say honor, but courtesy, that courtesy between two people doesn't exist within the entire space of the community. So where it's something that could be valid criticism, even if we remove my tweet from this, and we take Shinya's tweet, for example, that he posted up last night, about the community being in a bad spot, something about the leaders or whatever, which is the figurehead point of mine, but he elaborated on it like big time. That didn't receive as open to criticism as it should have been. A lot of people's immediate responses within the gacha space is defensive, it's to attack, and it shouldn't be the case. And like God's here, you're saying you disagree. I think you guys keep it civil over here. That's why I hang out in Saints chat, is because it's usually not crazy. You know what I mean? Like it's not something that we're like, you can't have a conversation or come to an agreement or disagreement in a very civil manner. But outside of this, your chat is rare, bro.
Hey, my opinion is that the chat reflects the streamer. And whenever I make a point, whenever I try to talk about stuff, I try to view it from like every angle possible. But when something is a little bit stinky, I call out it being stinky. So glad that, you know, that perception of my chat is good. I've actually had some people saying that my chat was actually really bad or something like Mr. Pokies. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know about that one, dog. I actually think this chat is amazing, if I'm frankly being honest. Rarely I mean, I've banned a lot of people, but my chat's like this because I think I banned a lot of people.
Yeah, see, and that goes into I guess the figurehead part, right? It's in quotations because I really shouldn't have to name random streamers or whatever, but this goes to everybody. If I were a part of the Wuthering space, but if I were part of the Wuthering space as what would be seen as a figurehead, then I have a responsibility to uphold that as well. And when you have a chat or a community that is rampant and you're not doing anything about it, you're perpetuating the problem. You're allowing this fire to grow until it becomes too big. Once it gets too big, now you're looking for the fire extinguisher. Oh snap, the house is on fire. How do we put it out? You could have stopped this a long time ago, you know? And so it's not a specific who though, AJ. It's just in general. That's why it's so vague. I'm speaking in a general sense that more of what Saint does, so to speak, for his chat and his audience should happen throughout the entire community.
I guess one little bit of clarification that I wanted to put in is that I don't feel like there are a lot of Wuthering Waves streamers in the first place. I think that I might be actually genuinely the biggest person in the category right now, and I only started regularly streaming like 2 weeks ago. And so I guess when you're explicitly calling out Wuthering Waves and then you're making a critique like this, it almost doesn't really seem applicable to Wuthering Waves as a whole. But like, this is the game that you're talking about, right? Just right off of the rip.
Yeah, and there's more to the community than just the streamers.
Yeah.
And this would happen with, like, I guess this would go hand in hand with what you're saying now would also go against what everyone else would tell me. Hey, there's not enough content. You need more content creators. Well, actually, and then they'll tell you like 50 different people that you've never heard of, but they know about them. So you can't have it both ways. Not specifically you, but you see why I would be in a conflicting standstill there. On one end, I'm being told that you don't have a lot of creators. On another end, I'm being told there are plenty of creators, I'm just not looking hard enough. So there has to be some form of like, it's clearly there or it's not there.
I think what happened in terms of like the WuWa creators is that there used to be a lot of them when the game first launched, and then we kind of had like the whole like tourism thing going on. A lot of them quit the game, a lot of them kind of like disappeared, and it kind of like ended up in a situation where it felt like the game had like a lot of people playing it, a lot of streamers playing it, blah blah blah, a lot of communities focused around it, and then those sort of just like disappeared as the months went on. And not necessarily due to like the game like being bad or like the game not being good. There's been like a theory that's been spread by some of the people in my YouTube comments that I think makes a lot of sense. It's the skill floor or like the skill investment or time investment to play the game got too high relative to the reward that streamers would be getting or content creators would be getting for actually playing it. And so we're even seeing it right now where like even some people that are like the bigger creators in the space, they kind of don't know how to play the game still. And it's been like 7 months, right? Like we have people with like 23 out of 30 on the tower, obviously not clearing it. Maybe Overdrive Zone isn't even unlocked for them yet. And then they're trying to say what's wrong with the game mode. You know what I mean? And so kind of like going back to that whole point of like criticism is not y'all's enemy. I mean, hey guys, a lot of people, they want to see proof that you've actually been playing the game before making like critiques.
Yeah.
Want to see people like playing or understanding the game first before you're like telling people what to change. Because this is like, you know, kind of annoying to see, right? As somebody that, you know, I believe you play a shit ton of ZZZ, right? You enjoy the game. I go into it, I don't attempt to clear anything, and then I'm just telling people, hey, there's something deeply wrong with this game mode. And then I show like a lack of understanding about the game's mechanics. I don't know how like disorders or anomalies work. I don't understand like how to like transfer buffs over with Sokaku, like things like that. Like I show that in my gameplay, and then I'm saying that there are big problems with ZZZ's combat at the same time.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a little different then.
Yeah.
Now it's further stretching it, so I get it.
Yeah. So that's a lot of the stuff that's been going around in Wuthering Waves. And so when the community, in my opinion, shuts down those critiques by digging into where those critiques were founded from, that to me isn't a problem. That is people who understand the game, who love the game, who mesh with the game's mechanics, speaking from the perspective of, okay, we know what's going on, you clearly don't, and you're trying to say that there's something wrong. And when that sort of like like filtering happens, I think that's extremely healthy for the community, right? You're having people that aren't putting in the effort to actually learn the game or, you know, actually understand how anything works, telling people that it needs to be changed, potentially make the game worse, right? So let's dig into why these critiques are being made in the first place. And if it turns out those critiques are coming from like a stinky perspective, hey, we can call it stinky and we can say, don't listen to this guy. And I don't think that there's a problem with that.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a problem with that either. But I don't think that would result in everybody not being able to critique the game in any way, shape, or form.
Oh,
because at that point,
you definitely can still critique the game. And I think Ryu Kusan's video, right, where a lot of WuWa, it has like an 80-something% like ratio. And this is coming right off of people saying that WuWa is stinking of toxic positivity. But what he did was he brought all of his critiques with the ammo, with the backing. He brought empirical evidence. He brought real examples. He showed that he understood how the game was working. And so people were able to see his critiques and realize, huh, he has a leg to stand on here. He actually knows what he's talking about. And what that means is
100%.
It's a lot easier to understand that, resonate with it, and agree with it. And that's just like, that should be the bare minimum coming into a critique. Point out what's wrong, why it's wrong, and how it could be better. Versus, hey, don't know what's actually wrong, say something is wrong, and then don't give a solution. There's a big difference between the two. And when you have bigger CCs doing the latter, it can be an extremely frustrating situation. Because these are the CCs who are supposed to represent this game, who are continually making content on this game, right? Getting 10, 20, 30K views on their videos. And then they're just coming off like the biggest tourist in gacha gaming.
Well, I mean, at this point though, haven't we, a little off topic, but on topic to what you said, haven't we established who's like which ones are tourists and which ones aren't?
Establishing tourists versus like non-tourists when it comes to this sort of thing?
Yeah, like a dedicated, and I mean, I know it's the whole meme of like they don't have a me in the community, but what I said in there is proven to this day. Like you guys didn't have a dedicated Wuthering creator at that time. And now you guys have more dedicated Wuthering creators. So it's way more appropriate to say it that like, hey, this is our Wuthering creator, boom. And we can look at it from this perspective. We can take that opinion, you know, with validity behind it, versus, as you mentioned, having a tourist, and then the tourist may or may not have all of the evidence or all the feelings behind it, whatever the case may be.
So yeah, I would say that the WuWa community right now is in a much better position to be sort of handing out those critiques. I think that we are kind of a lot safer in actually labeling people as tourists based off the takes that they're having. At this point, it's 7 months into the game. And, you know, if we're still having misconceptions that would have been cleared after like, you know, one month or a week or, you know, 2 months of like dedicated play, and those realizations are not being had, yeah, I think we can start calling people tourists. And I think it's a very fair thing to do because there has been enough time to get your shit together at this point. And if it's not happening, maybe we shouldn't be making like critical critiques about the game. We're kind of just playing it for fun.
Yeah. And that's totally fine, right? Like admitting that. Because that's how I look at Wuthering is that way. And that's only because for me, and this might answer the core thing or the glue and the purpose of stuff, but we can talk about that whenever we get to those points. To just briefly mention this here, what I look for in a game is fluidity and a solid function to the game system itself. A good example of this would be Monster Hunter. Love Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is almost a flawless game. It's so almost flawless that I can't think of a real flaw for it. And I've been playing that game since what, the PS2. So it's like the system mechanics behind Monster Hunter. The key thing is that the player interacts with the enemy, and the enemy interacts with the player. So you have a very large positive and negative feedback to the game. What that means is, in the event, you have, for instance, Tigrex. I gave this example yesterday with Red. The Tigrex is, you know, it rushes at you, whatever, and it has a charge attack. You know, it's very strong, kills you in a couple hits, probably one hit, depending on what it is, and you can pretty much stop it. Smash it in the head, it stops the thing. It rages out, goes in a rage mode, flash it, you know, crack its head open, whatever. There's a lot of positive feedback to you controlling the back and forth, right? A good interaction. What I don't receive in a number of gacha games, but specifically Wuthering, and let me clarify this, the reason that I'm very critical about Wuthering and Zenless is because I like those games the most. People think I hate Wuthering because I don't talk about it all the time. I don't hate the game, but outside of that, you showed off Fallacy with Brax. I believe that was yesterday.
Or that was on 2 days ago.
2 days ago, there we go. The Fallacy boss design is a very good positive and negative feedback. If you don't do this thing before I go into Gundam mode, you're cooked. If you do this thing, you might save yourself some time. Boom, awesome. No other boss in the game, from what I've experienced, has that same positive and negative feedback. They don't interact with you having an intro and an outro skill, or even a forte to that degree. And so you don't have a lot of that reception. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I kind of see the perspective that you're talking about. You're kind of saying, I guess from the glue, more of a direct relationship between some of the mechanics built into characters' kits, or even just the baseline game itself, like with intro outro skills, and having more bosses that directly interact with them.
Yes.
Okay. So
because like a hologram fight, it feels like a Soulsborne game.
Mhm.
And at that point, you know, that goes into the whole team synergy thing. I don't need a team to clear a hologram fight. You get so skilled at the game, you just beat it. Very similar to in Dark Souls, where you have the naked runs.
So I think that you brought up an interesting point about no other bosses actually having this loop. I actually mentioned this. I think we were on this topic in Red News Call. Inferno Rider.
Yeah, I think you said something about his motorcycle.
Yeah, he
stays
has
on the
this
ground.
loop because Inferno Rider is one of the most unique bosses in the game. Been in there since 1.0. In that it doesn't actually get broken or staggered until you break it 2 times.
Right.
They're taken off their motorcycle the first time you break them, and then they regenerate a whole new stagger bar. Then, when you break them a second time, they're broken for real. And then at the end of that second break state, they go back onto the motorcycle. And so this boss effectively has like less than half of like the vulnerability windows of other bosses. And so having more of that concerto, having more of those intro skills, maybe even slotting a Yan Wu on the team is one of the key ways to make that fight a lot easier and make that fight a lot more manageable. Much like how in the Fallacy, right? Because it starts going into the sky and becomes like the most annoying enemy in gacha gaming. If you have a pistol character that obviously can just bypass all the stuff that he's doing in the sky and, you know, still shoot at him, that is a quote unquote like soft counter to that fight that doesn't involve like the massive concerto damage or the breaking that you typically would use with a more melee oriented team. And so there are like, in my opinion, multiple routes to like, you know, defeating these bosses, multiple routes to you know, handling these encounters. A lot of people talking about how Chisha can just solo it. That to me is where I think this whole like glue point, this whole like interaction with the enemy, now that you specified it, it's a lot more clear what's going on. I think that there are examples of that in the game currently. And then a big part about WuWa is that there are alternative ways to just clearing the mode in the first place, or clearing the boss in the first place.
Right.
So when it comes to other bosses, you know, things like the Impermanent Terran, things like the Mephis, maybe other enemies like the Ikes, there's definitely a lot of different moves, a lot of different mechanics. For example, the Impermanent Terran, right? I don't think it does this in the tower. It might do it in the hologram fights, but it has like this one series of attacks where it repeatedly dives at you, but the attack is parryable.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And if you
swings
don't...
at you three or four times, and then it'll drop the flames.
Exactly, right? And if you parry those attacks, it won't do the flames.
Yep, exactly.
And the flames is one of the worst parts of the fight.
Yeah, and I think that is a really good positive reception or positive interaction between player and enemy.
Yeah.
Where it's like if you do parry it, it won't get the flames out.
And then the Ikes, one-shot move if you don't parry it.
Yeah, but you see how like parrying is such a key core to the mechanic for a lot of these bosses, that at this point, that's why I say it feels more like a Soulsborne than it does what Wuthering Waves would want to be. Because the intro and outro skills, I'm not using the core mechanics, the core combat mechanic of Wuthering Waves for a lot of these things. I'm just using the core mechanics of fighting, dodging, parrying, and, you know, basic attacks or skills. But I'm still missing the intro outros. Or the fortes.
But that's the thing. We can say that parrying is a core mechanic of the game. In that some characters excel a lot more in certain core mechanics. Like, to me, I view the core mechanics of the game as dodging, parrying, concerto, intro, outro skills are bundled into concerto. That to me is like where a lot of those core mechanics are, because they're available across pretty much every single character. And some characters are a lot better at others when it comes to leveraging those core mechanics. For example, Verena is one of the best concerto-focused characters in the game. She shits out outro skills for free, and intro skills for other characters, and allows you, right, to really leverage those a lot more in combat compared to a character like Storekeeper, who's a lot slower. And then you have other characters like Camellia and Jian, who are masters of parrying, because a lot of their attacks have very large parry windows that make it a lot easier. Then you have other characters like Dan, Jin, and Chisha, who have a lot of synergy with dodges and dodge counters. They do a massive amount of damage and have much more impact in their kit relative to other characters. And so the way that I view it is that these core mechanics that you're talking about, different characters have different specialized strengths that make them excel in different types of content. If there's an enemy that attacks a lot that isn't parryable, like Scar, Danjin's actually like, okay, well, she's not good against him because because he's Havoc resistant. But there are, you know, Chisha's good against Scar hypothetically, right? Because he attacks a fuck ton. You can't parry him. You kind of just have to dodge a lot. And then a character with strong dodge counters really is good in a fight against him.
Right.
But when you have like the one-shot parry moves and then like, you know, the triple dive from the Heron, that's where a character like Gian or Camellia, well, obviously not Camellia against the Heron because it's Havoc resistant. That's where they come in and can kind of carry that portion of the fight. And then against the Fallacy, Varina's just gonna shit out so many outro skills that it makes it so much easier to knock it out of the sky and not get into a disaster in the first place when it goes Gundam mode. So to me, it's like there are a lot of bosses that are intentionally designed to have weaknesses based off of a core mechanic in the game, and there are characters that, you know, excel in those core mechanics. So to me, a lot of like, you know, you said no other boss has this loop, but now we've gotten into like 3, 4, or 5 of them that have this loop where you have to really leverage a core mechanic in the game to deal with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from here, because the way that I'm looking at it is more so the glue, but putting together all of the core mechanics within the basis of the game itself. Like everyone has these options that exist to them.
Yeah.
And I see the way that you're explaining it is more so certain characters are more specialized at using these core mechanics than others. And I can see that. I can definitely see that for sure.
Yeah. So to me, that's where it's kind of like this critique to me almost is kind of like in line, like I'm not saying that you're like you're lacking knowledge completely, but when you think about it from this perspective and even with the specifics, right, I can already think of examples that sort of counter, like that are just counterpoints to what you're saying right now. And this is where like that kind of like full knowledge of the game, that full understanding of like what's going on, how certain characters, bosses, how all of these different things play and interact with each other. I think that's where having like that more cohesive perspective of the game really helps, you know, potentially eliminate some of these critiques in the first place.
Let me ask you, how does this, because now it sounds really close to Zenless. I have a really big issue with Zenless as well, and it's the game's fault. But for Wuthering specifically, with so many of these different ways to go about using the core mechanics and specializing in these characters, where is that in the game for us to find out, right? Because we know that there's not many guides out there that explain this stuff. I would love if there were, but there's not a lot of guide content out there that specifically goes over the different ways of combating something and using the core mechanics to your advantage in order to excel as a player. Is this information in the game for like any random player who doesn't, you know, hang around on YouTube or watch streams to be able to just go in there and figure it out and learn it that way? Because that's one of the things that Zenless has an issue with, is that there's a bunch of quote unquote tech that I know about Zenless and how to play it, rotations, things like that, but the game doesn't teach it to you. So the majority of players have no idea they can do these things. Like I got a comment on one of my videos recently, and they didn't know that you could swap out of a character while that character is still doing something on the field, and then, you know, do whatever it is with the new character and repeat the process.
So I've actually done several guides on tower resets, pointing out like what some of the weaknesses of different bosses are and like what types of characters to actually bring in to have the most success in those clears. My first video on that was actually literally titled "The Fallacy of No Rewards," and how, you know, if you want to clear this floor or have an easier time with it, you want to leverage characters with a shit ton of concerto efficiency. So I have definitely made content from that point of view just to like help people out. But when it comes to that info being in the game, it is a matter of how much can the game tell you versus how easily can you discover this on your own from understanding the game more. And I think when you play against a boss a single time and you get your cheeks absolutely clapped by the Fallacy's Gundam mode, then what you're gonna recognize is, if I were to break this guy, what would happen instead of him, you know, flying around? And it's almost like a trial by just playing the game. And then you'll find out, well, intro skills do a shit ton of damage to the stagger bar. And this thing, unless it's staggered, is a complete pain in the ass. And so it's almost like experimentation from the player's end. If I just break this guy faster, I'm probably going to have an easier time. And so a lot of it is going in, playing the boss once or twice, getting clapped by it, and then realizing, it's actually weak to XYZ thing. But it's also a matter of like, hey, how much of that do we want almost like spoon-fed or like told to the player versus how much do we want them to figure, you know, stuff out on their own just from understanding the core mechanics? And when the Fallacy is like a boss and the only troubles you have with the Fallacy are when it's a boss in the end game modes, it's like, hey, at least, you know, at this point in the game, the Fallacy was released when the game was like 5 months old. We should be able to understand how Concerto works how breaking works, where breaking has an impact in the fight, and it makes certain characters or rotations or fights a lot easier. And we should be able to apply this knowledge to the fight itself. I personally don't think we need like a tutorial to pop up on like how to destroy of how to beat the fallacy. It's like,
well,
hey,
no, not like that.
We could have like the context clues. Yeah, we could have like the context clues from the fight. We know which characters are concerto efficient, which ones generate it really quickly, and have that ability to apply knowledge to the fight. And in a sense, right, if it was all in the game, that'd be less content for content creators to make, frankly, right?
Well, no, I don't think it'd be like that, right? Because I know that for instance, Hoyo, I joke about all the time that they're trying to get rid of guide makers with the stuff they're putting in their games now. But I don't think that adding something like maybe a training mode, right? Zenless has a training mode and it's not fully fleshed out like a fighting game would be. Or even an arcade, right? Devil May Cry has training modes where you can practice like tons of crazy combos. But if we had something like that in there, I think players would be more open, or at least they would have the access to be able to do these things. Because without it, you just would never know it. You kind of just luck of the draw. Maybe you'll figure it out.
And I think that's a very fair critique. I think that if any person heard you say that, they would agree with you. But that wasn't the original take, you know what I mean?
It wasn't elaborated, I'll give you that.
But that's the thing. I think every single person could universally, and in every chat and in every WuWa community everywhere, would agree that a training mode would be good. And that's, again, like that's a critique that we kind of like work towards to figure out more about mechanics, to figure out fights. But that's the thing. That's a critique that's good, that everybody can agree with, because the reasoning for it is good. And it kind of shows that, like, hey, this is kind of like what I'm talking about when it comes to critiques about the game, is when they're rooted in reality, when they have like a genuine use case in the game, and we're able to talk about how the game is worse by this not being in here, then that's like a much stronger framing for the conversation, and that's a lot more agreeable. And like you can see the chat right now, everybody loves what you just fucking said. And this is like the level of like thought that I'm saying should be going into critiques. And it shows that you have like a deeper understanding of like what is in the game, and like how there's a problem that could arise from what's currently in the game. And this is like one way to fix it. And that would just be a lot more agreeable in the first place. And obviously it might not go as viral because people just like watching negative things, but if this is kind of like, if your critiques or additions or, like stuff that's wrong with the game and how it can be fixed was more worded like what you just said with the training mode, you wouldn't have gotten nearly the level of negative flack that you're getting right now. Do you get what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, and I mean, I got that with Red New yesterday, because it wasn't even a matter of like me, as I mentioned earlier, purposely doing that to stir the pot or something like that, right? It's me condensing a 3-hour conversation into a tweet, and there was, as I told him, there's no way that I would have been able to fully elaborate on every single thing right before bed after having this 3-hour conversation without just turning it into a video, which was never my intention to begin with.
But this is the thing, man. Trying to condense your 3-hour tweet and summarize it too much, I think that was a pretty dumb thing to do, frankly. Because I think you have some great thoughts to share, some great potential improvements, but it's like, hey, when we're wording it like this, the first impression that people are getting is like, hey, he's just saying there's a bunch of shit wrong, but he's not talking about how to fix it. He's not talking about why it's even wrong in the first place, frankly. And again, when we're doing this on the back of the the Iyo saga of a couple of months ago, you can just see how the framing is just a lot more negative than it needed to be.
I guess.
Yeah.
I only say I guess because I think that holding on to the previous stuff that happened, with that also being in its own form of misunderstanding, like it just adds into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm saying that it's like that was the last time that you had kind of like been involved with the community. Yeah. And then now it's like, this is your return.
Not on purpose.
Exactly. It's not on purpose, but that's the way that it came out. And to me, it's just like, I totally get what you're saying. I think you actually have some great viewpoints, right? Obviously, they're rooted in reality. They're rooted from your attempts to understand the game, right? And you clearly have like a level of understanding that's pretty high. But when we're like not leveraging that and we're not expressing that, right? And we kind of like almost made it like, a lot of people think you just quit the game, right? Like 4 or 5 months ago. And you haven't been playing it since, and then you're not being specific here and being vague. It almost looks like you're making the critiques without having played the game or keeping up with it. And that's what people don't like. They don't like when somebody like doesn't have or isn't expressing their knowledge about the game, but then trying to say what's wrong with it.
Right.
Yeah. So glad we were able to clarify that one there when it comes to the glue. I get what you're saying there. So it's basically like, hey, let's have a training mode or more ways to find out what the glue actually is, because the glue is there, but it isn't sometimes super clear that the glue is there.
Yeah.
And so the training
feel
mode would
like
help us
if
find
I were
more
to
of
add
this glue.
stronger glue, yeah, you know what I mean? Like Wu was missing stronger glue. That might have helped, but fully elaborating on it for sure, because that's actually pretty unique to me though. Especially for a gacha game to have like everyone's more unique at using the core mechanics, and you know it's like a 0 to 100 difference based on how you were explaining it, and that's super foreign, right? Like in Genshin or Zenless or even Star Rail, some characters of course are more specialized for that, like, you know, Super Break, but they still are able to utilize the base mechanics of the game. But I like this.
Yeah, and the thing is, man, the fallacy is like just one boss that they've added, and who knows what else they're going to be putting in 2.0 that requires more leveraging of different specialists on the roster to effectively tackle them.
Yeah.
There's going to be a character, there's going to be one that's just an annoying little asshole, right? That zips around everywhere, even if they're like broken. Maybe they like teleport and stuff. And that means like Zhongli Yao or Lumi or Chang Li, right? The most mobile characters in the game who can gap close like it's nobody's business for free. Maybe they're the optimal picks in those fights. And so it's just like, hey, having like these specialized sort of, obviously you'll be able to do the fights without them, but it's going to be a little bit harder. But having more of that specialty on the roster to me is where there's going to be a lot more depth in the combat and the whole team building and like pulling new characters' perspective. So I think the glue is there. The glue can sometimes not be apparent because it requires like a deep understanding of the game and the boss's movesets and their weaknesses to kind of like see where the glue is coming in. And the training mode would be an opportunity to find out more of that glue without necessarily as like clunky of a learning experience as it is, right? Just getting your ass wiped by the boss repeatedly and then finding out that way.
Right.
Cool. All right, so we kind of tackled the whole glue thing. I think that was a great discussion there. We covered figureheads and WuWa's downfall. Do we want to get into S tier content?
I mean, we can. I don't mind it.
Yeah, okay.
I guess, do you have like an interpretation of that before I start answering it, or?
Yeah, because I think like this one is a bit vague as well, right? We're just talking about S tier content that isn't reacts or guides. And, you know, I just kind of use the example of myself. I have like content that gets viewed to what I would view as like an S tier rank, but it isn't reacts or guides. It's kind of like discussions about the game, discussion about like the whole meta perception, and comparisons to other games. And based off some of the views that I get on that content, I think it would qualify as S tier.
Yeah,
but I
100%.
think you're implying a lot more than that in the scope. And I guess it's just wondering what that is.
Yeah, so it's pretty much just more. Like if you were to put more S tier content that isn't react and guides, then it would make more sense. What right now, what Wuthering has a lack of is purely entertainment content. The casual player who can see really cool shit, or, you know, a crazy clear, the stuff we just explained about all the different mechanics. Those type of videos where it's not specifically a guide, but it's more so showing you the beauty or the mastery behind Wuthering Waves. Here's how awesome this game is. There you go.
Do you want to see what I just put on the screen right now?
If it's the geographic thing, they showed me that after the tweet, and I love it.
Okay.
I've already seen it.
Okay.
More of that. Yeah, I actually talked to Emperor a couple of days ago, and I said, you need to be pumping more of this stuff out. And he's like, dude, it's hard because like it takes a lot of time. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but this is what you guys need more of. Because if you compare it between EN, like there was a tweet that, funnily enough, after, we'll talk about this later, but after I put out my tweet, you know, and I caught flack for it, all of a sudden everyone else starts saying the exact same points that I'm saying in my tweet, but they super elaborate on it. So I'm like, that's what makes me like, I'm not crazy, you know? But there's a tweet that got about 7,000 likes, and it says that the EN side of Wuthering doesn't really have a lot of the quote unquote fun content compared to like CN or whatever the case may be. And a lot of this content simply doesn't exist for Wuthering right now. Most of what you see, if you were to open a brand new incognito tab for YouTube and you typed in Wuthering Waves gameplay or just Wuthering Waves, you'll see Wuthering Waves, you'll see the actual official channel, and then you're gonna start seeing 9 times out of 10 you're about to see my face. But after that, you know, you'll start seeing little bits here and there with a lot of people talking about the game, drama, reactions, news, whatever the case may be. But you won't see the neographic or geographic national. You won't see people showing off the game and really giving you guys a crazy amount of this is what the game's full potential is, right? Like it's not enough of this other content to be able to attract the audience to do that.
I think it's a little bit unfair to put reacts into this, because what if you're reacting to S tier content to get more of it out there?
We don't have that. I just spoke about Red New, or spoke to Red New about that yesterday. We don't have it, and I want it.
So
Wallenstein is a great YouTube channel. Sydney Marr is another great YouTube channel that I watch, and I don't see enough of what I'll call the bigger creators reacting to this type of content.
Okay, so what you're saying is I just need to react to more Sydney Marr and more of these National Geographic things and then upload them to get them more of like a spot.
If you want to, right? Because at this point, you are Wuthering's like top dog. So if you were to start highlighting the smaller creators, I'm sure they would love it.
Okay.
Because that was something that earlier on when I was making content for that brief period of time, and then the rest of them kept going after that, they all quit. They don't make content anymore. And it's because at that time, and even we see it to this day, there's the drama, the reactions, the even if it's not drama, the quote unquote controversy. This is what gets the views and the attention from the community, regardless of the reason why. This is what is put in people's faces, versus something like the National Geographic channel, where like unanimously we've all agreed this is a great video, we love it. But there's not more, right? That video should be banging. Everyone should know what that is. The fact that I didn't know what it was and then other people in my tweet didn't know what it was, that's a problem within the space for that type of content. So we already have quote unquote S tier guides, S tier reactions, controversy, whatever. We need the other half of it. If you were to also look at, again, analytical brain taking over. If you were to look at Genshin Impact, and to a degree PGR, because I found some stuff for PGR as well, I just don't remember the titles. But if you were to look up some stuff, Genshin Impact has all of it. They don't have a lot of drama anymore, but they still have it. They have reactions, they have guys, they have drama, they have amazing shorts. And then they also have, I came back to Genshin after 3 years. I played 100 days of Genshin Impact. Here's what happened. I built so-and-so in a matter of 30 seconds or less. All these different things that happen within the space. And there's a bunch of them, even to this day. And this is completely off topic to, actually it's not off topic. I always say that Genshin is the quote unquote best of the gacha games from content perspective. Not because it's entertaining, but because it's the only one that has successfully shown results. A game that is going on 5 years later, and it is still able to take somebody from 0 to over 100,000 subscribers in a matter of less than a year. That's crazy. The only person to have done that in Star Rail, off of purely Star Rail, is WuWa. Everyone else that's grown over that point has had a mixture of other things. But for one game to be able to take somebody from 0 to over 100 off of purely content, and this content, it's not guides, it's not reacts. These are people making, essentially having fun with the game. You show this audience, whoever you're trying to attract, right? And they're looking for this fun content to be able to enjoy it, because we all enjoy the game. Someone in chat said like most WuWa players play the game. They don't sit on YouTube, they don't go to Twitch, they just enjoy the game. Why isn't there more content of people enjoying the game? You enjoy the game, I enjoy the game. There's a bunch of us that enjoy the game. There's no content for co-op. You guys had a crazy good co-op event a couple patches ago. No one talked about it. No one made any cool videos on it, at least not that I've seen, right? And it's like that kind of stuff should have been all over YouTube.
I just want to show you something real quick.
Where's more?
I mean, I think a 54K view on the co-op is...
But I've already alienated you from the conversation because you're already in the bracket. So you can't be the only one. You see what I'm saying? There has to be more than just you. Now, it's different if no one else wants to do it. I can't control that, right? You can't control that. And at that point, that's you know, it's hands in the air. But for so many people to say, I want to make content, I love Wuthering Waves, I wish there were more blank, and we don't have it. It's not like we're not playing it. It's just that we don't have it. I have to specifically look for things with the keywords and the SEO and whatever else to go find it. You know what I don't have to look for? Leaks, they're just in my face. Controversy, it's just in my face. Guides, that's just there. But none of the other stuff that's supposed to be fun and cool and whatever else, entertainment, doesn't exist. even when I was in your stream the other day, or last week or 2 weeks ago, something like that. The first interaction we had where I was like, I'm passing a mantle. And then you said you had a great idea where you wanted to go through other people's accounts and essentially fix it, right? And then I said we could take it a step further and turn it into a collaboration. And now I didn't tell you the full idea, but I gave you a glimpse of it. Imagine if that was fully edited and produced at a high quality level. You know how much the community would eat? Dude, imagine if, hey man, I'm gonna go fix Iyo's account. I'm gonna make Iyo the next best Wuthering player. You know how crazy that would be to put that in video format with high quality editing, a well-paced video, a well-paced story behind it? They would love something like that.
I just pulled that up on the screen. I actually did that for Miss Captain Cabinet's account.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is almost like the baseline, right? Like this is what we're working off of, but it's there, right? It's
Yes.
happening. It's happening currently.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I basically had like an open invitation to any WuWa creator to participate with me on this content. And I think Brax and I are in the middle of a conversation right now to start doing it. But this is where it gets a little tricky, okay? And this is where the whole commitment, knowledge about the game, knowledge about, how the game works and like expressing the skill, right? For you to be able to have the validity to do this, you have to know how to play the game at a certain baseline level, correct?
50-50.
Yeah.
What I've learned is that more of an entertainment factor comes from you not knowing how to play the game, or a combination of the sort, where one party knows how to play it and the other party doesn't.
To me, I mean, let me know if I'm like stating your words incorrectly. It's like, hey, a lot of CCs in WuWa right now, they need to stop being lazy so that they can unlock this sort of content. And maybe it's just like the lack of like overall viewers. They're more like concentrated in one area when it comes to WuWa. And that could mean, right, that only certain amounts of content get a lot of views, but that just means we need more people to, well, this is where the whole like for the bag thing comes from, right? Some people might have to take like a bit of a hit, and I don't think a lot of CCs are open to that, right? Because when you're trying to open up a new type of content, that's why I frankly think some of my videos lately, because I've been trying to innovate a lot, haven't been necessarily like popping off as some of the prior content. It's still doing okay, especially in combination with the live streams and everything. So I'm like perfectly fine there. But I'm experimenting with new stuff basically every single day now that I've started live streaming. And that means that like, hey, I'm taking a bit of hit to like my algorithm and my analytics. I'm like taking a sacrifice right now to expand the scene. And I also think that's something that a lot of established CCs are like, they're not willing to do, or they're kind of scared to do. They have to basically make a sacrifice with content that they know is going to do really well to innovate and try out more things. And people are, obviously in the month of December when ad revenue is the highest, right? That's not something that they want to do. And so for me, it's just a matter of like, hey, who's willing to bite the bullet in the sense? I've been biting it for the past couple of weeks. And if there were more people doing that, trying to innovate on their content, I think the scene would be better as a whole.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's kind of just like, Iyo, what it sounds to me right now is you're just saying, hey, y'all need to stop being pussies. Y'all need to stop being, y'all WuWa CCs need to stop being little bitches.
Hey, you said it, not me.
Hey, yeah, your words, not mine, right? But hey, that's the message that I'm getting. Like, people got to be ready to take some more risks to grow the scene as a whole. But nobody's really taking some risks right now. It's only smaller CCs who kind of hypothetically, right, don't have a lot to lose. That's where all the innovation is coming from.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, established CCs. Y'all getting called out right now. Fob, make a video about why Jinsei and Chang Li are in fact the same character, right? Like let's get some.
I didn't say that. He said that.
So, like, I'm glad that we're getting down to the root of the discussion, right? Because people just need to experiment more, try new kinds of content, and like, hey, dude, if you just put that in the fucking tweet, you got Twitter Blue. You can just be like, hey, like people.
You know
need
what's
to, like,
funny? The last time I was very blunt about saying stuff, they purposely misunderstood it. Like, it was so blunt, and I was very clear when I said it, but it was so far left field to them that it was wrong because I'm disrespectful. Like, I can't do it. No. I definitely don't have a link to it anymore. It was what started all the drama nonsense. It came off as very like, and I understood it once it was relayed to me well after the fact. It came off as egotistical when I obviously wasn't trying to be that way, but the message itself was lost in the tone. So instead of hearing what I was saying, they only heard the tone. Yeah. I'm like, okay, that's valid. I see how that is, what it is. That's on me and my bad. But what I was saying, wasn't wrong. And now we're here where it's like, you need more. I was saying the same thing back then, where it's like you guys have to get way more creative and make content, because every other space that I've studied and been a part of, anything like that regarding content, the creativity takes a huge leap over the guides or the reactions, the controversy, whatever. Because at the base level of it all, that's what people want to watch. They want to see somebody having fun. They want to see somebody enjoying the game, you know, and that's kind of what we're looking for now. We have the guides, we have the knowledge. You guys in the chat, you guys know how to play the game, right? Like, to be fair, you probably don't even need Saint. You already know how to play the game to the best of your degree. So now you need something else.
And that's the thing, right? And so to me, it's sort of just like a lot of CCs aren't playing into their strengths and they're not willing to take the risks. And it's just about like, hey, like if we want to grow the variety of content in this game, right? People are going to have to take some hits to make it all happen. And once people get a little bit more willing to do that, I think it's going to be, I think that's when we can actually start getting some more variety in the scene. But I'm going to be honest, I think that I am probably the main innovator in the space, in that like I have like pioneered content and then a lot of people have just followed in my footsteps. And obviously, right, like that's, you know, that's like a little bit of an ego, right? Like I am cool with that. Like I'm glad that people are like resonating with it and they kind of want to do the same thing. But I don't want to be the only person that's innovating.
I don't want to be alone.
Like genuinely, I don't want to be the only person that's innovating. And I'm not saying that I am, there's a lot of smaller CCs that are innovating, but where is more of that risk? Where's more of that experimentation from some more of the established and big CCs?
Okay, so what I did way back when was I got, for like Zenless, for instance, I helped Soul get to a certain point. I grabbed the people that I knew I could rock with. We can make content together. We're cool. We're chilling. You know, and we put together a little group, and I helped them learn more about YouTube, because there's clearly stuff that you know about YouTube that, you know, some of the smaller CCs might not know. And I'm sure you have a few people in your community that probably do make content, you know, and it's probably really banger. They just don't know YouTube. And if you were able to help them in any kind of capacity, I think you would get the not being alone factor. You would help yourself, because you can't really depend on the larger CCs. At this point, you are a larger CC, especially for Wuthering. You're the most dominant one on the platform right now. And them being where they are, they're in their positions. Tech is where he is. Poke is where he is. Smack's where he is. Faw's where he is. Box is where he is, right? And there's only so much you can do to even reach out and get the type of content that you know is innovative versus the type of content that they're going to provide for you. And you have to differentiate that and then keep it pushing beyond that point, right? Find someone else to do it. Like, there's a lot of people that you could probably get a hold of that may not be in the community, but they play Wuthering Waves.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's make this an open invitation then. Let's go ahead and pioneer more and more different types of content. I will react to your videos on stream. I will give you active feedback on things like thumbnails. We're going to make it all public, right?
Let's go.
Let's not do this in private. I'll give you advice on thumbnails, titles, blah, 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 all of that stuff, your editing and your flow. I've done that for one person already that kind of like made like a 25-minute video about one tower run, and I was just like, this is a fucking disaster, man. And so open invitation, drop that shit in React content. Let me know that it's actually like your video, like, and you know, obviously if you're like a bigger CC, I can help you out too, but sure, but more directed towards like smaller CCs that are, you know, trying to make a name, trying to innovate on their content, and obviously, right, like put a little bit of effort into it. If it looks like some dog shit, then I'll just be like, I'll call it what it is. But you know, it's like, hey, you put effort in, then I'll give you good feedback back. So just take that as like an open invitation right now. 2.0 is coming up. Let's see how much we can experiment, and you know, just put some work into it, make it nice, and we'll look at it, we'll review it. If it's unwatchable, I'll let you know it's unwatchable as well. And that's also good feedback to have. So that's there. So yes. So now let's go ahead and let's get some of that S tier content going. Let's start developing it a bit more. And obviously, I think it's also like a bit of a call out to other CCs as well, right? Let's start taking some risks. Let's also try to be pioneers in this space if we want to grow and let other creators as well just sort of have an opportunity to shine. And again, this is all going to be on stream. So that's going. I'm glad that we were able to get to the bottom of that. And that involves you as well, Iyo, okay? Like, I want to see some more innovative content from you as well, buddy. And then maybe we can do a review of that in the future.
Listen, I haven't fully determined if the community is accepting of me making content or not.
Well, I think after this call, I'll probably upload this because I think this has been like a great discussion so far. I think that now that we've been able to clarify the points, we've been able to assign a little bit more blame, and you know, I think it's just we've clarified a lot of stuff and we've made it more clear what is causing the issue and why the issue exists, and we've sort of determined, right, what the solution would be and why people, you know, why people aren't doing it. And how we can start to get people doing it. And now it's a lot more clear. Everybody in chat is now agreeing with your takes. Somewhat.
Makes me smile.
Somewhat. Now that you've explained them, they're starting to agree with your takes, right? Like,
yeah.
you can tell that my chat is a lot more friendly with you now.
True.
Overall, people are agreeing with you because now you've had the time to explain it. You've actually fully fleshed out your thoughts, and we've been able to sort of come up, first and foremost, and most importantly, with a solution.
Very true.
And that's the right way we should be doing critiques, guys. And we're seeing now, even like the most WuWa pilled chat in Gacha Gaming on Twitch is agreeing with you. You probably feel a little bit more comfortable making some WuWa content now, right?
You know, maybe. I don't know, man. It's still a 50-50.
Hey, man, it's just,
I'll shoot my shot at it, though.
I'll shoot my shot. Like I said, you got to take some risks sometimes.
You're right.
Yeah, like, Iyo, you're kind of being, you're being a little bit of a pussy right now, right? Like a little bit. Let's be honest here. Like you're being a little bit scared.
You're right.
Yeah. So let's just, you know, let's sack up. Let's sack up and let's get this done.
Okay. Down for that, bro. I'm down for that.
Cool. All right. So I guess we got the whole S tier content thing down. I think we nailed that right on the head. We come up with a solution for it. And then now we got the Kuro needs to be more directly involved. I don't know if you caught the part that I was talking about before, where Kuro's actually doing a lot of back advertising, in a sense, of like some older videos to get them pushed more. And they've like publicly said that they're trying to support their creators as much as possible. And this is also like a recent thing. I think it might have been made potentially like after your tweet, and so maybe your tweet's like the thing that caused this, but they're being a lot more active. They've actively asked people to like link their creations, some of their past stuff that's not in the 1.4 program, that's actually from all the stuff before. And so maybe even some of your videos would apply to getting some of that additional publicity boost. But right now, I feel like Kuro is doing a pretty good job in terms of like addressing, like smaller creators in the community and getting more of their stuff out there and in the public view.
And that's great, because that's exactly what I wanted. Not to say that like secretly I'm the Riddler and I plan this. That'd be crazy. But point being is that that's what I need and that's what I want from Kuro, because Hoyo has these same practices in mind, whether or not we see everything about it. And this is just me being, obviously a part of the Hoyo creators and whatnot. Some of these things they get told directly to us and vice versa. And Kuro needs that. They don't need an incentive to like, hey, if you make these videos, we'll pay you financially. But you need to have a relatively closer link with your creators so that you don't have misinformation, even if it's on accident, right? You have to be able to check that beforehand so that you look as best as possible as the developers or as the game. You have to be able to have a strong relationship with these creators, because content is what pushes the popularity of a game. If your game's not popular, creatively or content wise, the only people that play it is that cult following. I love me some PGR, but we do not have a strong PGR community as far as content goes. Like you really got to know who's making it, and doing whatever they're doing. Yeah. But that game could have been way bigger than what it was, and it's not. Another game that could have been way bigger is I was about to say Arknights, but it's not Arknights. It's very similar to PGR. I can't think of the name right now, but it fine women, really banger models, and it plays a little bit like Honkai Impact Third almost.
You mean ZZZ?
No, not Zenless. It's Ether Gazer. Thank you guys. Yes, Ether Gazer. That game should have been huge. It came out like a year or two ago, and it got completely swept under the rug because no one does anything for it. So it's like they have a cult following of people that play it, and it just didn't get pushed out. The advertisement for it was dog shit. Content creators didn't do anything for it because it's like, hey, if you're not paying me to make an ad, I'm not playing the game. And then the people that were interested in it got no reception, and they just they stopped. And I'm like, all right, well, there's another game that could have been great, and now we don't have anything for it. So having Wuthering and having Kuro be a little closer with creators, you get to see more of like, how can we as a developer give you guys something to make better content? or make more engaging content so that we ourselves look better. We grow because you guys grow. And now you put everyone on a higher pedestal. A lot of people think when I made that point that it's like, oh, I want the Hoyo CE server, but for Wuthering, which I do, but not for I don't want it to the same extent as that. If you guys are putting out guides, y'all absolutely need more than whatever this exclusion that they have right now with a few creators. They need more. You can what is it, the 4.0 2.0 beta, but you can't do anything with the footage. You know, some of us creators may or may not have access to that. We just get to play it. That's it. We don't do anything else. You know, and it's like, you know how beneficial that would be to somebody that really did take a week or two to understand the game or understand the new character and then make a guide on it and drop it day one. That's huge for us as Hoyo creators, right? To be able to drop a guide day one or negative day 3 before it releases, because it gets all the bullshit out of the way. We do all our testing a week or two in advance, and we can just work on the video after that. You guys having the ability to do that as some of the top creators, or the only creators in this case, for the game, Kuro should be recognizing that. Kuro should be highlighting, and I think this is beyond Kuro. All companies that have some relationship with their creators need to be doing something very similar to what Riot does. I love Riot and their creator program. Riot highlights creators. They have it in their app as well, where if someone makes a really cool video and the social media manager for Riot is like, yo, I think this is really cool, they will feature it on the front page of the app. They'll feature it on the front page of the website or a specific page for, you know, creator highlights here and there. If we had more of that in the gacha space as a whole, you would have more of a glow up or more grow up for a lot of these creators. So it wouldn't just be these 5 or 7 or 10 different creators at the top. Oh man, insert tweet here. I'm tired of seeing drama content. Why can't I see anything else with drama? Hey man, developers could have a huge push in that so that their game isn't flooded with these things, but instead flooded with a lot of engagement and fun and positivity. But that's something that they could totally do. It goes in advertisement. Whether or not they do it is on them.
I think the perspective that I'm getting off of this is that definitely something that I can agree with there. I think that, yeah, they definitely already started it. But, you know, hey, it's about how are people, you know, are we testing the commitment of people that are actually in this program versus working directly off of like reputation of them as a creator? Because, right, hey, like first impressions, that brand, it does a lot, right? It has like an implicit level of trust, but there are some creators that are just abusing it. They're abusing it, right? And so I think it's all about, hey, let's just, you know, spend those dollars more wisely. And I think there are a lot of great ways that they could be spending it. But at the end of the day, right, you also have to do that balance of like views to because the views, the subs, like all that, their actual presence in the community, that is what leads to like the actual purpose of that sponsor, right? To get more eyes onto something actually being a success. So I can see why they do like a lot of stuff with like bigger creators in the industry, but I can also see, right, where there's an opportunity to grow people through the program. So more sponsorships, more of that stuff for smaller creators.
Yep.
Cool. I think we've gotten a bit more of like a light over here. They're starting to do more stuff, but they could be doing a little bit more, especially on the smaller creator side. All right, now this is going to be one that I think I had a couple of critiques that I was able to sort of drop right off the bat. I don't even know why I copy pasted that when I'm about to rewrite the entire fucking thing. So Kuro failing at vision, Genshin plus XYZ. I kind of brought up the example of like, hey, this is more like a label on like the genre as a whole versus necessarily being like a Genshin specific thing and then trying to break the mold. Because I brought up the example of roguelike games obviously being named after Rogue, and then Souls-like games obviously being named after Dark Souls. That's a label that's put onto basically any game afterwards that even has like, you know, half or even less of like the mechanics of those baseline games in the first place. Right. So I feel like Genshin-like is just simply going to be a term that's being used, and it's not like that's necessarily like a bad label, because a lot of great games have that label of roguelike or Souls-like, and they're widely considered some of the best games in the industry.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
You didn't ask me a question.
Oh, okay. So, you know, so with all of those thoughts in mind, do you think that this is kind of like, how do you feel about this critique with more of that context, or I guess more of that explanation from my end?
So the way that I look at it, and now I do have newfound information from what we talked about earlier with the glue and the core in the system, right? Failing at their vision and being Genshin, like as you said, I didn't even say that in a bad manner, because it's not a bad thing. Genshin is the pioneer of these open world gacha games. It took off well beyond its own means, and so now we have it in a sense where this will tie into a little bit of immersing the player. You have at your base Genshin Impact across whatever open world you have, but specifically Wuthering Waves. At its core, it's Genshin, and then they've added things to make it turn into Wuthering Waves. They've added story, they've added different mechanics, they've added different elements to the game, things like that. They should take this above and beyond, in my opinion. And what should happen is basically, instead of having these similar systems, you could make your own system on top of that. I'll give an example that I gave Red yesterday, the ecosystem. While I don't inherently have an issue with the ecosystem being similar to Relics, right now, I would rather these echoes perform like closer to what they were originally copied from, which is Pokemon. The battle system, we can already catch echoes as it is. They added shinies right before the game fully went launch, but we don't really have the whole shiny thing that you would in Pokemon, right? Like random shinies that could pop up. There's a lot of things about the ecosystem alone that would carry them into an immersion or a more aesthetically pleasing open world for the game, because we see that with Pokemon, again, for a big example, where even if you take the base 151 Pokemon, you have tons of people always on Twitch shiny hunting because that's a thing that they want. Now, Wuthering is open world. Imagine if you were hopping between worlds to go look for this very specific shiny with this very specific stat that you're looking for, so that you could be one of the only ones that has it. That's a huge thing for people, even if it's not for content. You just want it, but that keeps you locked into the game. It immerses you into the game so that you continue to play the game, paid or free to play. You include more of these things into your game that you already have at a base level, and you expand on it. And now you have your own game. You've taken so many different baseline elements from everywhere else, Genshin, Pokemon, Dark Souls, Devil May Cry, whatever. And then you expand further beyond that so that this is Wuthering Waves. The next time someone mentions anything pertaining like, oh, this is nope, that's Wuthering. Oh, that's the thing from Wuthering. You can't say it's from Pokemon anymore. Wuthering has twisted and turned it into their own thing so much that it is specifically Wuthering Waves. And then they would have a very solid identity. Right now, we know Wuthering is the game of Wuthering because, logic, that's what it is. But when you start to compare and contrast, Wuthering has too many systems that could be synonymous to all these other games. And that's just games overall, right? All games borrow something from someone else. But at some point, they have to separate themselves from that comparison so that they become their own thing. Wuthering Waves has to find a way to do that, and they have to find a way to do it that's very in your face, because that expands overall the image itself. I think that's a better way I'm trying to say it. It expands the image of Wuthering Waves overall so that it's a huge positive for the game, and it makes it so that it stands its own test of time. You don't have to compare it to Genshin anymore.
Okay, I mean, I can look at this and I can agree with a lot of the things that you're saying, right? Expanding more on the ecosystem, shinies, random spawns, like, hey, there's like a nice skin to it, but maybe we can sweeten the deal a little bit, right? Like maybe a shiny echo guarantees that it's like double crit or something like that.
Ooh, that would be so amazing.
Right,
and then it'd really be like, I gotta go find the shiny.
And
That'd
obviously, like, it could be worse than like a normal echo that that just rolls double crit by itself. But we could just say like the shiny, it has like a guaranteed double crit, and like that's the first 2 rolls that's guaranteed. But then these spawns are super rare, and so it's almost like it's like the same thing at the end of the day, just a bunch of RNG to make sure that you get the shiny spawn. But when you do get it, you're getting a nice reward, the skin, and then maybe a guaranteed double crit roll or something like that. So that to me is just like, hey, it's just like another layer onto the RNG. It's not necessarily game breaking either, because you can just get it, like you would just be able to get that anyways in normal gameplay. It just drops as a +10 with double crit rolls on it. Or you can like choose the stats that it has at like a +10. Something like that to, obviously reward the player for more time commitment. There has to be a balance though at the end of the day to ensure that you don't have like burnout from like doing it. And so keeping it in the realm of like stuff you can already get, but it's just, if you get it by RNG and the rolls, you can just get it by RNG from the shiny drops. Something like that. I think that would be cool. I think that's definitely something like, again, now that you specified it, it sounds a lot better. Right. It sounds a lot better now that you specified it. And
Yeah,
obviously,
but you see how long we've had this conversation?
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
that I'm complaining, but that's a whole hour and a half that I have to find a way to condense into so much. And then I also have to explain it for people that, as chat had a little bit of an issue earlier, I said the same thing, but they didn't understand it right away. So I had to find a new way to explain it or fully expand that conversation. It just, at that time when I made the tweet, yes, I'm opening it up for conversation and criticism, but I wasn't opening up for an attack, because that's not my intention. And so having, all of this flooded into you, that's why I'm like, there's no way I can explain everything to everybody at the same time and someone not take this. Because like, you see how quickly the tweet happened. The next morning, somebody was streaming it. 3 hours after that, there were videos popping up on YouTube. There was no time for me to even process how I'm gonna respond to people. That's why, like, Ethan hit me up that night, and I'm like, dude, we can have this conversation right now, because I don't know how to explain anything. It's too much to tell everyone at once.
You got a little bit overwhelmed, but you also have to factor in, man, some of the wording that you used in this original tweet is definitely like fail at their vision. That is a pretty negative connotation, right?
Yeah, but I think it's the difference there. I did a lot of writing in high school, of course. I think it's just, I don't see words in the same manner, and that could just be on me, right? That's a me thing, where I don't realize the word choice may ruffle some feathers unintentionally. So yeah, that.
Let's just say the word choice was not the best here.
Yeah.
And I think just, thinking about the messaging, right? And again, thinking about the context, not to like bring up old stuff, right? But last time you were kind of interacting with the WuWa community, it didn't end on the most positive note. And that, I think like just a great way to have made the messaging here a lot smoother is to paint things with a bit more of a positive spin in the wording, especially considering that prior context. Because people came in with like the whole, he was kind of shitting on the game, being negative, even if you really weren't. And now it looks like he's doing it again. Right? And I think that is sort of like the vibe that a lot of people have had looking at this tweet. And obviously got magnified by the fact you weren't able to bolster or react or respond to everything in real time. But hey, man, we gotta keep in mind, right? We can't look at things in isolation. We can't look at things in a vacuum. We have to factor in everything when it comes to the perception of how this is going to go with the community. So honestly, hey man, just if you're gonna do something like this next time, let me proofread it a little bit, and then I'll maybe like just let you know that like, hey, you're gonna get fucking flamed for this. All right?
What if I allow you to like word it, right? And then I'll let it go after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's just, I think that I know how to do messaging quite decently. I've given a lot of critiques to a lot of creators who have made critiques for the game. And, like, I don't know if that's just, like, hey, like, they're not, like, fully understanding, like, what the scope and, like, the consequences of certain word choicing can be. But it can be very large. Because, Kuro has opportunities. It is a lot different than failing at the vision, but you're basically saying the same exact fucking thing. Right. And it's like has opportunities to really break away from the Genshin identity by expanding more on this. Same exact fucking thing that you're saying, but it's way nicer than this and puts way more of a spin on WuWa.
Maybe I just gotta practice more positive wording. I like the way you said it. I'm looking at what I said and I'm hearing what you said. I'm like,
yeah, one's gonna be a lot more positively received by the WuWa players for sure. Yeah, so let's just, so again, wording is key here. I think a lot of this is like, a lot of this is wording issues in my opinion, now that we've clarified it. And I think that all the stuff you said about the shinies, all that stuff, it's not about failing at being a Genshin-like. It's that this game has so many existing systems that can be expanded on that would just make it more, like, even more of a pioneer in the space.
Yeah.
Great. All right. I'm glad that we're able to clarify that. I think your reputation is literally growing as we speak with every minute we spend going through this. Next one. And again, more of the wording. No real purpose. This kind of makes it seem like the devs are wasting their fucking time. What do you really mean here?
Well, we already talked about it a bit with the glue in the core segment that we went over. Because the way that I was looking at it was more along the lines of like intro, outro skills outside of the very specific things that we have. They don't have a universal purpose beyond benefiting X character. I guess this to go into team synergy. I was going to ask you about this earlier, but we were moving along with the topics. And so with team synergy, right, it feels a little closer to way more specific teams or way more unique teams that only work with 1, 2, 3. And I wouldn't be able to give you very specifics right now because it's just not in my head. I'm sure you would know some of them, but Verena, for instance, is pretty universal. You can use her in almost every team, if not every team.
Yeah.
And then you come across something like maybe Sanwa, where you don't really get to use her on every team. And then you're only using her for her basic attack, if I'm not mistaken, her basic attack damage increase that she's going to give to the board. But then you look at it more so from, if I were to remove the whole like swap canceling or negative edge or anything like that, and I'm looking at this from a casual perspective, what else does that team benefit towards, right? Like, is it everything just a hyper carry? Because then we get into something like Genshin, which is, I call it the mistake, with Bennett, Xing Shou, I think is how you pronounce his name, and Shine Ling, the original 4 stars, and how to this day they're so strong, they're on every team. There's no reason for you to really build anything else because they're so strong that you can universally use them on anything. It doesn't matter what it is. In Wuthering, it's a little bit different where they're way more specific. And so when you have a much more specific thing, it opens the door for creativity as far as like the combos go and, you know, what you could and couldn't do. But Wuthering has been limiting that thing or that freedom at the same time with some of the changes they've made in the game. We can look at early on with Kakarot, where they had the whole thing with him and Yinlin, and you know, he would keep the buffs or she would keep the buffs, and you could swap back and forth, and it made them very strong as a pair. So you would want those two together. Then they removed one, and then they removed another. So now it's like she just doesn't get it. And a character like Yinlin that had a lot of potential to be relevant to this day and in a much more like top tier perspective, well, now it's looked at as like she's not up there anymore. You'd probably want to use someone else, or maybe you only use her for this specific electro comp, things like that. So that's how I'm looking at it from the systems perspective, where I feel like you would need more. You need more of that's why glue is such the perfect word. I'm not even memeing. You need more of a synergistic feeling to the characters overall. Not even more complex intros and outros. It feels like I don't need a team. I think that might be the shorthand way of saying it. If I were to play Wuthering Waves brand new, it just feels like I don't need a team. If I wanted to like buff a character, then I put somebody on the team. But that character doesn't really do anything besides the buff for whatever DPS it is that I'm playing. That's why for me, I brought up Kakarot and Yinlin. I was really interested in that because they worked off of each other.
So I think you bring in a bit of an interesting point in terms of like, there doesn't, like this whole argument that we don't necessarily need a team. There are a lot of like built-in synergies, right? There are even like some characters that quite literally don't function unless they have specific teammates on with them, right? Jinxie is a great example. She literally doesn't work unless you have coordinated attackers or you're quick swapping like an absolute fucking madman to build up her stacks.
Right.
So she has a way to work without coordinated attackers, but it's like extremely hard and technical to use. So people don't really like go for it. And you also have situations on the other end of the spectrum, right? Where Danjin can obviously solo all of the towers, as long as they're not Havoc resistant, because of how well she can perform by herself. Chisha as well. And so I think there's like a good balance, to me, it appears like there's a balance that's been struck in terms of like the team building. You can decide to hyper invest in a character just on the outset based off your roster, where obviously you can like supercharge your Camellia by putting a Sanhua and a Shorekeeper on the team. Maximize every single buff possible. You know, have naked Sanhua with just Moonlight and Overture. She doesn't do any fucking damage on the team, and then Camellia does all of it, and you can still clear pretty comfortably. Right? But then you have like the other end of the spectrum where you have a character or a composition like Zhongli and Encore or Zhongli and Changli, where the two characters are intended to be quick swapped basically the entire time, abuse their long animations while they're dealing damage to go onto the other character and inflict damage on them as well. Kind of do damage of two characters at once. So I kind of view it from the perspective of like, there's a lot more freedom in how you can slot the teams. Zhongli can be used in that dual DPS comp while also being used in a hyper carry comp with Yinlin. And Yinlin can also support Jinxie simply due to the fact that she has coordinated attacks that aren't tied to a liberation. Or that aren't tied necessarily to a cooldown at all. Yinlin can have close to permanent uptime on her coordinated attacks because it all comes from her Forte circuit, not from Resonance Energy or anything like that. I view it as simply the game having more freedom, and sometimes having freedom to do whatever you want can give you the perspective that like the choices don't matter as much. And I can get the perspective that the choices don't matter as much, but it also loosens a lot of the team building requirements a lot and lets you pair more characters together and experiment a lot more with different teams and just adds a lot more replayability. For example, like Zhang Ling, you're never going to use her with a Dendro character, right? That's probably like one of the worst fucking comps in the game.
We talking about Genshin now, or we talking about?
Yeah, Genshin. Like Zhang Ling, Pyronado, Goba, get him. She's
No. You'd use her with Dendro. You would put her in a Dendro.
Okay, you can use her in Burning for Emily. Okay, but you need to pull a specific limited character to make that work.
Kinda.
Yeah.
Genshin might be the worst example to use right now, because they just keep giving us a bunch of 4 stars and free shit, and even if it's not good, we can still use it.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of like restriction in the team building to me is like not necessarily the best, because now it feels like it's more of like a roster check. It feels more like you have to like specifically pull 1 limited character and then 2 more for the team to even be playable in the first place. And obviously that's very profitable. That's great. But it's not the best thing ever, especially when you don't feel like you're playing that suboptimally when you're slotting, let's just say like a Zhang Li Yao with another DPS. That actually has higher damage compared to like using Zhang Li Yao with Yinlin, because of how the skill difference, your inputs can actually make up the difference in like, the simplicity and playstyle and the lack of buffs.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more room, I think, for skill expression in WuWa to make characters feel a lot better. And I think the thing with Genshin Impact is they have to tie a lot of these interactions or viability into specific character kits. Like any freeze team without Shenhe is like, why are you even playing the team? Right? Like Shenhe, without her, why are you even playing a fucking freeze team? There's almost no point, right?
Probably. I haven't even built my Shenhe, bro.
Yeah, and so it's like, why would you
I
ever
love
play
Mayaka, still haven't even played her.
Yeah, why would you ever play a burning team without Emily? And Hyperbloom, don't feel that good without Nahida. You can play it without her, but it just doesn't feel as good. 1000%, because Nahida just turns Hyperbloom into like her playground with how basically every buff she gives and her constant Dendro application, right, just makes it feel so much better to play. Hyperbloom is goated. Hyperbloom killed the game, man. Fuck that shit. So stupidly easy to play. So stupidly easy to play. All right, you back, Iyo?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we just got off the whole discussion about the multiple features and stuff. I assume that immerse the players in the actual game just really lends more into like that whole shiny thing that you were talking about before.
Yeah.
Right, so I don't think we need to expand on that further.
Correct.
Now this is the thing, man. Let's get into the last piece of the pie here. And that's the ending sentence. And this was also one that obviously, right, was a little bit vague. But I think just based off the conversation that we're having and now that the points have been heard out, how do you feel about this statement that the vocal majority has shunned it? It seems like, at least from what I've been seeing in the chat and what I've been seeing across interactions, right, like people are generally open to critiques if they're rooted in reality. They make a lot of sense. They come with like evidence, and then they also explain how the solution is actually beneficial. And now that you've had the time to do that, it feels like everybody's agreeing with your suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, that was really cool to see too. I think you have shown me a different side of the Wuthering community that was not shown to me before. And I think that's what makes the big difference. Because of course, when I made this tweet, it was prior to even Ryuk's video being put out there. But a lot of the feedback and reception that I have experienced, that I've seen other people experience, things like that, is more than likely where that came from. Even a few tweets earlier, because that tweet, I know the timing was crazy with, you and Smack and the Vars thing going on, but that tweet had very little to do with that. It was more so the reception of everything else going on. Yeah. And to see so many tweets or Reddit threads about, we want this content. Why doesn't this exist? And I'm so tired of this. It became very like, this is clearly what's going on versus, oh no, there's a whole nother side of the community that does not feel that way at all. And I feel like, honestly, if more of this side of the community was shown off, it would be a way better, I don't even say better, it'd be a completely different perception across the board. Yeah. Because what we did is something that I've been trying to get creators to do for a long time, which is just be able to have a genuine conversation without, hey, my goal is to make you look dumb and, turn it into content do whatever,
Yeah.
attack you, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, we could just have this conversation and be totally cool. And if more of the community saw that, they would also feel like they understand that, hey, we can also have this conversation with the streamer or the creator, and we don't have to turn it into like name calling or, you know, trying to make it a point to embarrass you or to humiliate you.
Yeah.
Instead of like, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from so that maybe I can agree or disagree to whatever's going on.
Yeah.
But this was wonderful.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you appreciate the conversation, man. And the kind of like spin or the perspective that I want to put on it is really similar to what Tech has been saying before. The entire WuWa community is kind of like on the defense from what I like to call astroturfers. People that are intentionally going into the community, trying to like pose as players, but then come up with the worst suggestions in gacha gaming, right? That kind of like are just trying to create issues out of nothing, create issues that aren't actually there, and then try to drive some level of negative sentiment about the game. And you're just gonna have those people because of the fact that Genshin players despise this fucking game. A lot of Hoyo players just despise this fucking game, right? And it's, in their eyes, their best interest to go in, almost like infiltrate the communities. You see it on the WuWa subreddit. There is so much negative sentiment about me on the WuWa subreddit that people use as a talking point to say, oh yeah, even the community hates him too. You look into the people posting that, and 90% of their posts are in Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail or like the leaked subreddits for those games. And then you start to realize, oh fuck, maybe these guys are a little bit disingenuous with how they're like displaying and talking about, you know, content creators and stuff in the scene. It's real. I did a whole post on it. I just told the mods in the WuWa subreddit, ban these clowns. Like, if you see that 90% of their posts aren't even in WuWa and all they do is play Hoyo games and they're just on the subreddit talking shit half the time, just ban them. And now that people know more about that, they view every single critique that can be made for this game under a very like specific lens. They want to know that you know what the fuck you're talking about. They want to know that you actually thought your points through and that you're not making shit up just for the sake of making shit up and stirring the pot. Because that is what so many people have been doing already from the very launch of the game. And so it's just a matter of like, hey, there's filtering going on for the critiques, and I don't think it's bad. I think it's necessary because of how much opposition this game gets in the public sphere. And unfortunately, I think that you fell a victim to the filtering because your shit in here was so vague and in some ways, right, I think you agree with it, poorly worded. Despite you having positive intentions, it made it look like you were kind of coming in with a negative viewpoint. And when that's the perspective that people have, it's a lot easier to disagree with you, even if you have good points. And so now that we've taken the time, right, to actually like hear you out, to hear about what's actually going on and the fact that your critiques are actually pretty good and like pretty positive in like what you're actually talking about when it comes to changing the game, you're talking about the opportunities rather than if they don't do this, they're fucked, then it's like, I think it's just a lot more clear now what is happening. And the community is seeing it a lot more. And I think the community is going to take you a lot more seriously after this. I plan on uploading this. Hopefully you're okay with that. Obviously going to do some edits and cuts, get some chapters and stuff going so that people can actually see what you're trying to say. Like you mentioned, some of the stuff can be solved with quickness, takes efforts and willing parties. And you know, you have to be one of those people that's willing to put in more of the effort into fixing up the wording and getting the messaging right. And I think you'll be like a helpful proponent of this moving forward. But you've got to put a little bit more effort in to just, you know, clarify what you're talking about, why you're talking about it, and why it's good for the game.
Touché.
Awesome.
I'm down for that.
All right, sounds good to me. And yeah, and then obviously this is like a pretty negative spin to end it on, where it's just like, hey, you guys are like being blind right now. Stop being blind or you guys are fucked. You know, it almost reads like as like a little bit of an insult to the community. And so, you know, we don't need to be doing that stuff.
True.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think that wraps it all up. Go ahead and sub to the man so you can keep up to date with what he is doing in the WuWa sphere. And yeah.
Well, all right. Thank you for having me, big dog. I'll let you get back to it.
Yeah, for sure, man. I've got a couple of other tweets to look at, and I'm glad we were able to resolve this one. I think, honestly, very well.
Hell yeah.
All right, dude. Take care.
All right. You too.
Have
Peace.
a good one.